Well, hello to everyone in our audience, and thank you so much for deciding to take another step with us on this journey of spirituality and health as we explore the very exciting book, I've Decided to Live 120 Years by Ilchi Lee. We have been, throughout this podcast series, talking with really interesting people who've made decisions to change their lives, why they made those changes and how they made it. And I can't tell you how excited I am to welcome to us today to Dr. Fatima Bustos-Choy. She's a PhD in humanities, and she's just delightful. How are you doing today?
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Happy New Year.
Well, thank you so much. Fatima, I know that you are the founder of a consulting company. Could you tell us the name of it and what it's all about?
Yes, the name is Gaia Flow, Gaia Flow. Gaia from Mother Earth, of course. And the flow, the whole nature of the name of the company is following nature's flow in terms of our development, our growth, and following our dreams in a more natural way.
And I know you're concerned in this consulting company with finding the right balance between material and spiritual dimensions of life. What do you mean when you say that?
I think for me, it's because it's kind of my lived experience, having been in corporate life for so many years, 25, 30 years. And I feel like at the height of my professional career was when I felt the lowest of my self-fulfillment. And I couldn't quite reconcile the two. Like, why do I feel this way when I shouldn't be? When I can check off, all of these indicators like Ilchi Lee talks in his book. And yet there was this deep longing and deep, really emptiness. And so I started the spiritual quest, and much of it, what I'm proposing is from my lived experience of really finding and working our whole person, our whole selves, and be able to be much more of a viable and positive contributor.
Well, we're going to delve into those in a few minutes, but one other thing in your background that intrigued me is your relationship with corporate America. And I know that you have been a former trainer for Citibank in California, and you're consulting, I think, with CEOs in corporate America as well.
Yes. It was my first profession when I came to the United States. And I think I fell into the teaching role because after graduating from college, I taught for a year in the Philippines. And it seemed like a likely path for me. So I was in the financial services, in the field of financial services. And then somehow I found myself in the training and development field. And since then, I've just been on that path. So I was a corporate trainer and then a corporate director of learning and development, aerospace company, and then the last was with Citibank. And so in that role, I provided leadership and organizational development. I worked with the executives, I worked with their managers, as well as with their employees.
Well, this is exciting background, and you bring together so many things. Based upon all of that, let me read you something straight from Ilchi Lee's book, I've Decided to Live 120 Years, about how he made the decision to change his life. And I'm curious at the end of this, what it sparks in you. And this is what he has to say. He says that what's hopeful is that in the second half of life, more than at any other time, is the optimal time for finding and realizing self. What people ultimately want isn't money, cool cars, expensive clothing, or lofty titles. It's not material values like the attainment of wealth and social status. What they want, and this is key, is the feeling that they can live freely and independently, the feeling of loving and being loved, the feeling that their lives are precious and valuable, the feeling that they're contributing to something bigger than themselves. In short, he says, what people want more than anything else is the inner satisfaction that comes from the realization of their highest values. I wonder how those words and that philosophy resonates with your decision to change your life.
Actually, when I first got Ilchili's book and read those words from him, I felt he was talking to me personally. It's like, I mean, I know he knows me, but I go, wow, is this like, are you, like he was talking to me personally? Because honestly, that's how I spent those years in corporate life. It's like, what's the next promotion? What's the next salary level? What's the next title? What's the next? What's the next? What's the next? And so there came a point where, as I said earlier, at the height of my professional career was also at, I felt the lowest of my own fulfillment. And I felt like this gap between what I had at the material level and what I lacked at the spiritual level. It was so pronounced for me. And that it was clear that having all of these other material values, albeit they were needed because I wanted to support and provide a quality life for my family, that even though those were achieved, it wasn't really what mattered in my life, or they weren't really the ones that gave me fulfillment and meaning. And thus the choice to go on this spiritual journey and spiritual search.
Wow, that's really beautiful. I have to tell you, I resonate very well with that. I spent 14 years as a senior C-suite officer of a Fortune 20 company. Mm-hmm. And I really do understand the pressures of that world very much. And then I understand the need in my own life to make a change. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You made a decision at some point to become involved with the body and brain effort. Mm-hmm. Yes. As a part of this choice of making a change in your life. I wonder how you found your way to body and brain. And was this a dramatic departure from your previous life, or was it a natural continuum in the flow of your life?
I think it was a natural continuum with some dramatic changes, if I can say that. I first came across body and brain, really, I was looking for something to help me with my energy level. Oh. Because we had an unexpected death in the family. And after the funeral, I felt like somebody just siphoned the life out of me. I felt like a walking zombie. Seriously, it was just, and I didn't know what to do. I mean, I was pretty active. And I think I was actually taking yoga even at the time, but there was, I just, it wasn't enough. I mean, I still felt, kind of like a zombie. And I came across body and brain, and I thought, well, let me at least give this a try. And so I joined, and immediately I felt more alive. I felt like, wow, I actually have energy again. And so I extended my membership, and soon, within the first 3 months, I became a lifetime member. Oh. And because I felt the benefits, I felt the change in me. So I was a member for many years, and then came this pivotal point, which was really going to one of the retreats. Oh. And from there, I literally received a vision. And that vision was to bring brain education to the Philippines
Wow.
as a way of me giving back to my country. There's a lot of kind of even other factors associated with that, um, you know, from our cultural background and so forth. But it was so clear to me. I don't think I've really experienced that ever again, but it was enough. It was that one time was enough for me to make that change, to then transition from being a member or from being a student to actually being a center manager.
I see. I
Yeah,
see. Looking back, well, just as you also were making this transition to body and brain, had you been active physically? I
mm-hmm,
know you said you were doing yoga. What other
mm-hmm.
kinds of things had captured your attention and energy in the past?
Well, I did. I was pretty active. I mean, I would go to the gym. I mean, I've ran 2 marathons. So I, I believed in physical fitness. But physical fitness is just one thing now. It's just
Uh-huh.
one thing. It's not the all-encompassing thing. And as much as I devoted a lot of time and energy to that. So being involved with body and brain, and then of course as a one time a center manager, it is really more than just the physical aspect of it. It's still important, like the physical power that we need to develop, but it's the beginning point. It's kind of for me, it is the entry point.
Well, that's just a really excellent observation, and one that I'm sure many in our audience really will appreciate. That this is not like going to the gym, although you get the benefits physically of exercise and those sort of things. But the entry point is not an exercise entry point or a gym entry point. It's something so much larger. When you made this decision, um, choices have consequences. You've mentioned that it got you so far into doing this that you eventually became a center manager. But as you started to get more involved as a student, what were some of the consequences of your decision? And were all of those consequences good?
I would say that yes, all the consequences were positive, but they were not easy. Okay, so
Ah,
I think there's a distinction there. They were not easy. Well, at a very kind of mundane level for me, the first thing was I wanted to overcome my desire to sleep in. And so I thought, gee, can I overcome this need to sleep in if I go to a 6 a.m. class? And so I kind of challenged myself with that. And I did. I did. So I would get up at 5 and did everything and be at the center at 6 o'clock. And I trained 3 days a week, and my time was 6 to 7 a.m. And so there were some things that were more difficult in terms of changing habits.
Mhm.
However, what I found was that as difficult as they were, I had more energy to do them. Like my mind I had more motivation, I had more initiative, I had more willpower to follow through on those challenges that I put on myself.
Oh,
I
what
think
an
I think
excellent.
that's the main difference that
Yeah.
I personally felt.
Any of us who have been involved on this on our own spiritual healthiness wellness journal, I think we've all come to understand, I think, that making a commitment is really in and of itself therapeutic, and I'm just so impressed, and I hope that all of the people that are watching us today, young and old, and by the way, we have people watching us who are in their 20s, and last week we met with someone who was 91.
Wow.
So we've got a long span of people that are engaged with our
Yeah.
show.
Mhm.
But one of the things that I think we all have to learn and appreciate is making a commitment and sticking to it is such an important part of anyone's journey towards fulfillment, don't you think?
Absolutely. And I think that's where body and brain principles help a lot. I mean, you know, it's the first of the year. It's very common for us to make those resolutions, right? And for me, what I have found is the principles and the training are what has helped me personally to follow through, because I think that's the hardest thing. It's easy to say, but the follow through, the sustainability, and then making it a part of your life, I think are the toughest things. It's, you know, to do. And but the way that body and brain works is that because it works at all levels, that somehow, at least for me, and I have found it with the members that I've worked with, that the energy to follow that, to honor oneself, to honor one's commitment, and to follow through, even though we fall off the wagon every now and then. And, you know, there are times I don't get to train as much as I'd like to, but the fact is that we come back, we get up again, we try again, we go through it again. And I think that says a lot for the practice and you know, and for the individuals.
I find your honesty and your candor refreshing. There are so many people who feel like, boy, if I make one mistake, or if I don't feel like doing it this day or this week, then I just stop forever because I failed. And I think you've really said something so important. Your enthusiasm about the fact that sometimes, no, this is not always easy. Making a commitment and a decision like this sometimes can be hard to stick to it every day.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as we know that there are other people just like us, and when they may have not kept their commitment for a couple of days or whatever, they get back up on there and they go back and do it again. And all the positive benefits accrue to that decision. And I'm so glad, because I bet you there's a lot of people who now are going to decide, you know what, I can stay the course. I can keep at it, thanks to hearing you say that today. So thanks for your honesty.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
As you think back to the people in corporate America, I think that what, at least my experience is, people that are in the work world, in almost any job, doesn't have to be in corporate America, our lives are filled with so much stress and tension. What are you finding that you're able to transmit, and what's your message to those who are in that work world every day with all of the pressures and tensions and the expectations to deliver results, you know, always? What are you saying to them about the work you're doing at Body and Brain, and how that relates to helping them in the middle of the fray have a better life?
Yeah, I think it's so important to have some tools that we can use for ourselves. Having been in the learning and development field, I was involved in creating programs for employee development, leadership development, management development. And with Dr. Reed, as you mentioned, you have been in the corporate world and you know the stressors. I think, for one, stress is, as you know, also in the medical field, stress is part of our lives, right? And we actually need it. And sometimes we create it because we need it. I mean, you know, it's like really like because sometimes stress is what feeds us, you know, feeds the adrenaline, feeds the mind, and keeps us going. And then when we achieve it, like, we're so victorious. So we created the circumstance in which we can be victorious, which is fine. I mean, that's kind of part of life. But the majority of the working people and people I come across may not always have the tools, may not always have the training, may not always have the resources, for that matter. And so what I truly appreciate about body and brain is that these principles, these tools are so accessible to each and every one. Like,
Yeah.
like you don't have to go to the gym, right? I mean, it's great if you can go to a center, but a lot of these things are self-empowering because, like the 1 minute exercise, you don't have to do anything. You can just do it for 1 minute. And um, there is, of course, there is the online Change Your Energy, site that people can go into and listen, read, participate. So there are many tools, but people don't know that. And so part of it is letting people know about these resources and tools that are available to them.
Do you get much resistance from corporate American people that says, well, I just don't have time for this, or I'm not sure I can deal with all of this spiritual stuff. I just need to focus on my Excel spreadsheet.
Well, you know what? I do lead some corporate training still. And I have slowly interjected, especially the 1 minute exercise. Mm-hmm. And at first this is what's so sad is that, and I can relate to this myself because I was one of them too, where touching your body, tapping, they look at me like, really? What is that? I mean, there is such this either a novelty or strangeness to even connecting with one's body. But after like 2 or 3 exercises, they actually ask me, can we do 1 minute exercise? Can we do it? So I think that the resistance comes in this feeling of strangeness. And that's why it's sad, because we are so disconnected from our bodies, that in the corporate world, the focus is so much on, the mental, the intellectual, the technical aspects, that we're so disconnected from the bodies that produce these results. And so when we introduce this whole concept of connecting with one's physical body, it's so strange and so new. That's where the resistance is. There is the spiritual aspect. I somehow weave it in, and they don't even know what hit them sometimes. They just say to me, you're like so different. You're so calm. You're so wise. And I think it's just more integrating it in sometimes how I talk about examples and what to do with difficult situations.
Great.
And that, I will say, has come from many, many years of being in this practice and studying, of course, with El Chile and many of the masters.
So let's talk a little bit more then about this lifestyle thing. And I want to start and go a little bit more on being in touch with your body and feeling. So you just, some people who are watching our podcast may not be familiar with the tapping of the body. And you started to do that. Maybe give some of our audience who is not familiar with that, what you were just doing just then.
Well, it's one of the simplest things, right? And actually, when we were children, of course, we don't know that now, but when children, we actually did many of these, like bouncing, and we call that vibration training. But really, just moving your body. And the tapping is, of course, to awaken our senses and awaken the brain and so forth. So all of these very simple techniques and simple ways of releasing stress, releasing tension that accumulate inside of us. And there are simple ways to like even breathing, as simple as breathing, are simple techniques to release the tension and recover one's, self and centeredness.
I see. Well, I tell you, it was very difficult for me at first, this tapping of my body with my fist, and being taught to concentrate on just the feeling, and I thought it was very strange. And now I just love it because it really does bring me so close to being in the moment, in the present, as opposed to my mind wandering about, I didn't answer that email the other day, or I have a call to return. But now when I'm tapping, I'm right here present.
Yeah.
Do you find that also for you?
Yes. Now, doesn't mean that I still don't think about something. But I mean, sometimes, oh yeah, by the way, I got to do this. But I think that I am able to get back to my body much, much quicker. I don't stay in that thought. And I come back to my body. Yeah. So to me, that's a big help, because there are times when we're stressed out, we stay in that stressed zone. We keep thinking and thinking about the negative situation, and we don't know how to get out of it. And we're like in this rabbit hole.
Exactly. In terms of the exercise component of our lifestyle, you mentioned this 1 minute exercise, and I thought it was just so important what you said, is that you don't have to have an expensive membership at a gym. You don't have to have a special uniform, the most expensive tennis shoes. You make it sound like that it's pretty easy to do. Tell our audience a little bit more about what do you do with this 1 minute exercise, and how does it work for you?
Well, actually, it's quite, sometimes I just do squats. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I just tap my chest. Sometimes I just tap my brain. Sometimes I just tap my toes, especially if I'm in a restaurant or I'm meeting with people and I want to be inconspicuous during my 1 minute. Sometimes I just do breathing, but it's just something that brings me back to being present.
That makes sense.
To me, yeah.
I've got a little device on my watch and, on my wrist that every hour it alerts me. And at that hour, I stand up or I sit down or I'll run around the room for a minute, whatever, push-ups, jumping jacks. But every hour, I do 1 minute of exercise. And I'll tell you, you mentioned it focuses you, it brings you back to yourself. And guess what, by the way, it's terrific exercise. So yeah, I would urge everyone who's not doing it. It's an easy trick to do. And you can, are there any of the other techniques that you teach through your body and brain teaching that are physical that you also enjoy? Are you still a stretcher, for example?
Yeah, so stretching, definitely. One time we did plate balancing. Don't know if you did that, but to me, that's one of the best stretching exercises. We do dancing a lot at the center. So we call that vibration training. And in the beginning, when I was a new member and we did that, which we did usually on Fridays, I looked around and I go, what is this crazy thing people are doing? I didn't want to do it. I just felt so self-conscious.
Oh.
I just felt so self-conscious. And I understand that now when new people come to the center and they're a little bit like hesitant, or it's that self-consciousness. It's like, do I look stupid? What am I doing here? But then, we ask them to just, don't worry, don't think, everybody's doing it. So you're not, it's not like silly. It might feel and look in the beginning, but then the energy takes over. And it's one of the best things, and it is through dancing that I recovered my sense of not so much of enjoy, but my sense of it's okay to be silly,
Exactly. The
my
freedom.
son,
You
yeah,
discovered your freedom.
yeah, the freedom to be silly, the freedom to, you don't have to be perfect, the freedom to be okay. It's
To
just really okay.
the freedom to be joyful, the freedom to
Yeah,
be happy, the
yeah.
freedom to be yourself.
To
That's
be
what you
oneself.
to
That's what
be
it is.
oneself. So
Yeah,
we will definitely urge everybody, if you want to have some fun, jump around like a little kid, and the heck with everybody else. Just be healthy and happy and joyful for life, which takes me to the next issue of lifestyle that I wanted to talk about. You've kind of touched on it a few times already, and that's our mental health.
yeah.
There again, you've indicated that some of the things that you do for the sake of trying to diminish stress and anxiety in your life. Do you want to just expand a little more on how you keep yourself balanced mentally and emotionally?
I think for me, for me, it is one. There's a plan. I mean, I do like to plan my like month, my week. So there's some kind of planning. What do I want to achieve? What is my goal? Um, and having that kind of as a direction. So first. Second is I do write things down, and not that I'm good at checking them all the time, and not that I'm good at achieving them all the time, but at least I get them out of my head so I can put them down, and then I can refer to them. So that's the second. And then the third is something that's keeping what is really important for me at the forefront.
Mm.
And for me, it is really my connection with my spiritual self. And so if I don't get to do it first thing in the morning, somehow during the day, I will have some quiet time. I will read from Ilchili's book. I will read from my spiritual book, other spiritual books. And just sometimes that only takes 10, 15 minutes, but it helps me to put things in perspective. Um, the other thing is I do consult with my husband a lot. I say to him, well, what do you think about this? And what should we do? So it's reaching out to other people, and he's the first person I would reach out to. And he gives me perspective. Oh, don't worry about that. Oh, we'll take care of that later on, and so forth.
I think you said something that I really don't want to lose, and I think it's so important. And you are, by the way, very wise. So I'm excited by that about you. And that is that for you to have optimal mental health, you feel the need to be connected to other people. In this case, your husband. And I also have a feeling that your mental health and psychological balance may also come from your reaching out to the students that you teach. Do
No,
you find
absolutely.
do you find that giving to others and connecting to others is essential for your own health?
Absolutely. And I do meet with the members, and I arrange where we can have breakfast together. And I reach out to them. I find being thoughtful is so key. Like thinking of them, just texting them, because I know so much about their lives, and especially if they're having a hard time, if they're, having illness they're dealing with or some kind of a personal thing. I text them, I ask them how they are. So that's my way of connecting and thinking of them. I think being thoughtful of others, for me, it's very important. Um, Showing appreciation. And I know a simple call, a simple text, a simple "how are you" goes such a long way.
It goes that way for you and for the person that you're helping. Is that
Yeah,
what you're saying?
I think so. I know it gives me joy. And then of course it's reciprocal, right? So you just keep building on that. And then when I do, and by connecting with others, I feel um, like I'm just widening my horizon and my consciousness. And so that is, I think it's an important aspect of life, especially as we age and as we leave the corporate world where we're constantly surrounded, you know, with people and demands. And now suddenly there's this open field. And I know for me, there is this open field. And so I find I have to create those moments. I have to reach out. I don't wait for them to call me. I just
Well, you know, but
take the initiative.
since this show's theme has been about how do we make decisions to change our life and stick to it, and some of the elements of those decisions, I think that what you seem to be saying is you made a choice to be consciously thoughtful, considerate, and kind to others. And I bet you now you just incorporate that in your life to the point where you don't even have to think about it anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of it, of course, being the firstborn out of 5 children. I did this at an early age, so it's kind of part of my character. But I will say this, that being one of the precious rewards that I have experienced being a center manager is really experiencing unconditional love. Because, people come to the center, I don't know them, right?
Mm-hmm.
They come, they sit in front of me, and in the next 10 minutes, they're like crying, or they're pouring their hearts out, or now I know their life story. And to me, that's such a privilege to be able to connect to people. And from there, I truly learned what unconditional love is. It's not just for family, but it's really, people that come and looking for help, and not judging them, but being there to listen, and really much of the time it's to listen, and then offer some ways of helping them. And then as they become members, and then sometimes they fall off the wagon, sometimes I don't see them, but yet I still have that connection. And then suddenly I get a text from them, and then they come back to the center. And so I think the unconditional love, which of course, Il Chile is the prime example of that for all of us, is that you just love people. They come, and, it's not because they're becoming a member. It's just because they're people.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Yeah. We have a couple of minutes left, and I want to just sort of finish up on. You talked about your spirituality a bit, and you spend time reading principles of spiritual thought, mm-hmm. and you spend time, I think you said, just sitting alone every day. Are you? Is that meditation for you, or quiet? And how do you sort of see? And what was the decision that you made about advancing your spirituality in the context of all the other elements that are going on in this decision to have a more complete and wholesome life?
When I was at my lowest in the corporate life, realizing that it really is my spirituality that mattered the most to me, I could clearly distinguish between the angst of wanting the next promotion and the angst of not feeling my soul. It was so clear to me that the angst of not feeling my soul was so strong that I traveled, I did so many things just to feel that. I traveled to Nepal. I went on vision quest. I went on a vision quest for 49 days, sleeping in a tent. I did vision quest where I didn't sleep like for 4 days, 4 nights, because I really wanted to feel my soul. That is what it was. And then I came across body and brain. And it's as if I was being prepared to get here. It's as if all of that was like training to be here, because then I didn't have to look for anything anymore. I really felt like this practice was feeding my soul, and then some, was not just feeding, but growing my soul. So that, to me, it's so clear. That's the most important aspect of my life. At this, growing my soul, completing my soul. At the same time, I also know that that doesn't happen in a vacuum. That the way to grow my soul is really through others. It's really through helping other people. It is really through, a vision of making this a better world. So it's not in a vacuum. It's not just me sitting and meditating. It's spirituality in action.
Spirituality in action. Yeah. Oh, that is wonderful. Well, let's conclude. I want to just read you one more piece from the book, and it putting all the pieces together, and we'll end on this with your reaction. And that's this idea of the concept of completion. And you've just laid it out so beautifully. This is what she says in the book. And I've underlined this part in my book in really bold colors. He says, I'd like to suggest completion as the value we should pursue in the second half of our lives. Completion means everything is realized and to make complete or whole. What do you make complete? You make complete yourself, your life. Completion isn't about the visible world or anything external. It's about the world of consciousness, a sense that allows us to feel what is going on inside us. It's a feeling of, you use this word, fulfillment, filling our hearts, like pride, satisfaction, oneness, and peace. And finally, he says, completion is finished in the final moment of life when we breathe our last breath. A life of completion is one that allows us to in the moment of death, look back on our lives, to feel satisfaction and fulfillment, and to close our eyes in peace and happiness. I have no more regrets or resentments. I've lived a life full of meaning, and I'm proud of myself. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Any last thoughts at how you are putting all these pieces together in your life for completion for you, Fatima?
Well, I mean.
By the way, I should have said Fatima, but I said.
It's okay. It's actually Fatima is the.
I said it right.
You did say it right.
Yay me.
It is really the way I'm called back home. But to me, the way Ilchi Lee defines completion is something I truly resonate with, especially at this stage in my life. I think about what is that one thing that I absolutely need to do in the event this is my last day, will I feel like, I have done everything that I could possibly do, and I feel really at peace and ready to go. And I will say there is still one thing that I would want to do, but this whole idea of completion has made me to reflect and not take life for granted. To reflect and not take life, meaning that, I'm going to be awake tomorrow. Just like when we are young, we have so many, many more years, so we don't think about that. But now it's like that finish line is so much it's like on that line of sight.
Yes.
It's that line of sight. And so, but rather than being fearful, for me, it's more, I gotta get my act together, or I really have to focus and align my energies to what is important, and how I feel like I can leave this world with a contribution. I think, to me, if there's one thing also that I learned from this practice, is contribution. Is how can I contribute? What can I do to contribute to a better society? And so that whole idea of completion is so It's right in front. It's right up close and personal for me.
That is a marvelous way to end. And I would just emphasize, and I'm sure you would agree, even if we are someone who's in their 20s who's watching this podcast, that finish line, you never know where it is. So you might as well go ahead and make the decision today to live your life accordingly. And so it's just as your sage advice is just as good for a 20-year-old as for, I mentioned a few programs ago, we had someone 91, and I'm sure she would have enjoyed the same thought that you've mentioned. Well, Fatima,
Yes.
now that I know how to say it in Philippine,
Yes.
you are an absolute delight. And I can't thank you enough for joining our I've Decided to Live 120 Years podcast. Your energy is infectious, but above all, I think you are the perfect role model for people who need to have some reinforcement about making the choice. You can't do all the wonderful things if you don't start with making the decision to change.
Yes.
And you're giving us such practical advice, but more than the advice, it's just your example of your enthusiasm that comes from your lived life as you describe it, and how you're living your life today that will, I think, motivate a lot of people. And the last thing I'll say in closing is I really appreciated your candor about sometimes it's not easy, sometimes we don't always succeed. There are so many people that give up too soon just because they're not perfect today. You don't have to be perfect today. Just keep at it, keep going, and there are a lot of people that will hug and love you. I can't wait to meet you at the center out there, and I will see you down the road for sure.
I'll see you again too. Thank you for the chance to be at your show.
All right, and for those of you that are in the audience, we really do love hearing from you, and people write us, which is so much fun, and they give us ideas for shows and questions that we might like to answer. So. If you there were things that Fatima talked about in terms of techniques that she mentioned, you can find all of those on the website. And so subscribe to the the Brain Education Gmail. You can contact us there. You can go to the website at braineducationtv.com. You can also subscribe to the to our TV channel. Lots of ways of connecting with us, but above all, feel free to reach out and connect with us, and we'll look forward to communicating with you online, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next edition of I've Decided to Live 120 Years podcast. Y'all take care. Have a beautiful, wonderful, exciting, blessed day. Bye-bye.